I didn't think my hands would tremble at the wheel, but they did. The final curve before turning onto my street slowed me to a crawl slow enough for a bicycle to pass. The fiery red maples lined both sides of the road, Colorado's autumn always too beautiful to keep emotions tightly locked away. I took a deep breath. 6 years. 6 years without a call, a visit, or uttering the word family unless forced. Yet here I was, driving back to the old house, my colonel's uniform neatly folded in a leather bag on the back seat. I'm Rebecca Adams, 29 years old, colonel in the U.S. Army cybersecurity strategist and official Pentagon liaison for a billion-dollar defense project with Vanguard Technologies, where my father and brother work. Here's the kicker. No one in my family knows I hold that position. This homecoming. It's not a random leave. It's the first time in 6 years I've chosen to face not just them, but the memories I'd locked away. As my car rolled into the familiar driveway, I caught a glimpse of my mother through the kitchen window. She was wiping the table. No glance outside, no welcoming smile. No one ran out to hug me like in those family movie scenes. I wasn't surprised. My absence from Christmases, Thanksgivings, birthdays, it stopped being mentioned long ago. Before stepping out, I glanced at the leather bag. Inside was my pressed uniform medals, gleaming the colonel's insignia, prominent on the collar. It was the culmination of 10 years of sweat tears and literal blood. But tonight it would stay there. I wasn't here to shock anyone. I was here to see if this house, these people I once loved, had any room left for the Rebecca they'd refused to understand. If you've ever left your family to chase something they didn't approve of, if you've ever stepped through your childhood home's door, wondering if you're still welcome, leave a comment. I want to know I'm not alone. The old wooden door still creaked like it used to. The scent of pine-baked bread and silence. Not the warm kind, but a heavy, stifling quiet like stepping into a time capsule where everything froze the moment I left. Rebecca, you're here. My mother's voice came from the kitchen as if she'd sensed my presence through sound, not care. Yes, it's me. Your room's the same. Go rest. Dinner's soon. Everyone will be there. Eric's coming early today. No hug. No eye contact. Her words were instructions, not a welcome. I nodded, though she didn't see. I dragged my suitcase upstairs, passing a hallway lined with photos Eric in his MBA graduation gown, Eric receiving a corporate award, Eric and his wife by their new house. Me, nothing. No commissioning ceremony, no uniform, as if I were a mistake they didn't want to record. My room was unchanged, the heart-shaped wall clock still ticking the oak bed, the bookshelf with novels I'd memorized. But it felt different. I wasn't the 18-year-old girl anymore. I was a colonel. I sat on the bed's edge, gazing out the window. The autumn breeze stirred the branches, carrying a hint of nostalgia through the glass. I'd stopped expecting them to understand long ago, but that didn't mean the wound was gone. I'd just bandaged it, hidden it beneath my crisp uniform, my classified reports, my briefings with senior officers. I opened my suitcase, pulled out the leather bag, and unzipped it. My fingers brushed the thick fabric of my uniform. They paused at the silver colonel's insignia, pinned proudly to the collar. Touching it in my childhood room, amidst old judgments and indifference, felt both sorrowful and resolute. I folded the uniform back, tucking it under an old sweater. Not tonight. Tonight I'd sit through dinner like a stranger. But tomorrow was Vanguard's strategy meeting, where Rebecca Adams would appear not as the fated daughter, but as the woman neither the company nor my family could ignore. I wouldn't need to say much. My rank, my insignia, my presence would do the rest. Have you ever hidden your success out of fear of being misunderstood or envied by your own family? Ever wondered if they'd be proud or disappointed if they knew? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm reading. Outside, I heard Eric's car pull up. My mother rushed to the door, her voice bright like she was welcoming a hero. I stayed seated. Still Rebecca. But this time I wasn't waiting for an invitation to the table. I stood, fixed my hair, and faced the mirror. The woman staring back had the same eyes, direct, calm, unyielding. Eyes that had stared down international cyber attack reports, tactical maps, life or death decisions. Those eyes would now face the people who doubted me. Tomorrow. Yes, tomorrow everything would change. When I descended the stairs, the house's atmosphere had shifted. Not warmer, just noisier. My mother was pouring tea, and Eric, my brother, was recounting his latest strategy meeting with a mix of smugness and expertise. She laughed louder than usual. They didn't hear my footsteps on the stairs. Or maybe they didn't care. Miranda Cole personally picked me to lead the security system restructuring team. You know, Shannon always says I've got a clear strategic mind, Eric said, his eyes gleaming as he mentioned the CEO. No one asked how long I'd been back. Rebecca, you're down. My mother turned as if just noticing me. Eric was just telling me about work. I'm so proud. She set down her teacup. Want some peppermint tea? Or do you still avoid it because of your stomach? I gave a small smile. I'm fine, thanks. Oh, right, I forgot. You're still doing something, right? At some base on the East Coast. I didn't answer. No point disrupting the perfect picture they were painting with Eric at its center. I'd chosen my path, but strangely even accepting that the sting of being pushed aside lingered. At the dinner table, a picture-perfect family scene unfolded. White tablecloth, flickering candles, my mother's roast as delicious as ever. But it wasn't just food on the table, it was expectations, outdated measures of success and propriety. My mother asked Eric about his new real estate investment, his plans for another child, his Hawaii trip. Me, not a word. I was the empty space in the conversation. Oddly, I'd once hoped someone would ask. Now I hoped they wouldn't, because if they did, I'd have to tell the truth. And the truth would shatter the carefully built illusion around Eric. Has anyone ever sat among family and felt like a stranger? Been defined by the past they want to remember, not who you are now? Leave a comment. I need to know someone understands. When Eric stood to talk about his new project, one I knew better than him since I'd approved its terms from the Pentagon, I just listened, not from lack of confidence. I wanted them to see the truth themselves. No prompting needed. Dinner ended with my mother saying tomorrow's a big day for Eric at work. The CEO will be there. Hopefully everything goes well so Eric can be considered for VP. I nodded, smiled. It'll be a memorable day. They didn't know, but they were about to. Some wounds don't bleed, but they linger like cracks in a wall, faint to outsiders, but undeniable to those who've lived among them. After dinner, I excused myself early. Not from exhaustion, but because 14, I needed space to breathe. This house was too small to hold the version of Rebecca they'd never acknowledged yet, too vast for me not to feel lost. My room was still at the end of the hall to the left. The small sign on the door still bore my handwritten marker, "Dream big, be brave, ironic," since those big dreams and bravery were what drove me away. I turned on the light. The golden glow illuminated everything as if time hadn't passed. The desk still bore the ink stain from when I spilled it practicing college essays. The star-patterned rug frayed, but still in place by the bed. The bookshelf packed with classics, Orwell, Hemingway, Maya Angelou. But I wasn't looking for those. I was looking for what may be proof that I was once loved. I stepped to the wall across from the bed. My father had once hung a row of photos, my state math award, my high school honors diploma, me, and my prom dress. All stopped at 18. Nothing after. No photo from my ROTC scholarship acceptance. None from my military academy graduation. None of me standing tall, commissioned as a second lieutenant under spring sunlight, amid the surprised gazes of my male peers. I'd told myself I didn't need those, that I was strong enough to stand alone. But in this moment in the room, where my first dreams were born, I felt like a chapter torn from the family story. I sat on the bed. My fingers traced the worn wood of the frame, stopping when I found a small drawer under the nightstand. It creaked as I pulled it open. Inside were a few old notebooks, some postcards, and an ivory envelope yellowed with time. No recipient's name, but the handwriting was unmistakable, my mother's. I opened it, my heart tightening. Rebecca, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I'm not writing to send it, but because I can't say it. Today I read an article about a group of female cybersecurity officers who stopped a cyber attack on a defense control system. In the photo, I couldn't miss you. You looked tough, confident. But what brought tears to my eyes was your gaze, the same one I saw when you were 6, determined to ride a bike without training wheels. I wonder if that day your father and I hadn't opposed your choice to join the military so fiercely. Would you still want to come home? I'm sorry. I was scared. Scared you'd hurt, scared you'd fail. But I forgot you always knew what you wanted and had the courage to see it through. If you ever come back and find this letter, please know I've always followed you, just didn't know how to step closer. I set the letter on my lap, eyes blurring. For the first time in years of silence, I saw my mother, not the woman who set expectations, compared me to Eric, held him as the standard, but a mother learning to see her daughter as more than a reflection of her own lost dreams. If you've ever found something proving your parents loved you, Just didn't know how to show it. You'll understand how I felt. Share in the comments. I know you're not alone. I folded the letter, slipping it between the pages of a Maya Angelou book, who once wrote, I ascribing people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. Tomorrow I'd make them feel who I truly was not through titles or ranks, but by walking into that meeting room and standing tall as I always have. Before turning off the light, I looked at the photo wall again. I didn't need a picture to validate my success, but I still hoped one day there'd be a space there filled not out of duty, but pride. Have you ever sat at a family dinner and realized every word had a target, but it was never you? I have. The table was set impeccably, as if for a distinguished guest. My mother always went all out when Eric was around, and tonight was no exception. Scented candles, embroidered tablecloth matching dishes, all like a ritual I wasn't sure I was invited to. I sat by the window, my old high school spot. Back then, I'd daydream staring at the night sky, imagining myself as a pilot or scientist. Tonight, I stared at my steaming soup, strategizing emotional containment. You know, my mother said as Eric sliced the first piece of meat, Tiffany just got promoted to regional CFO. She's so talented. Your age too, Rebecca. I nodded gently. Tiffany's always been hardworking. And smart, she added. Knows how to seize opportunities. Remember when I told you to go into finance? If you'd chosen the right field, you'd probably have a downtown house by now. Eric chuckled, not looking at me. Not too late, Becky. The military offers retraining if you want to switch paths. I sipped my water. My silence seemed to comfort them as if I'd tacitly agreed I was on the wrong track. Oh, tomorrow's the big meeting with CEO Miranda Cole, Eric boasted. The new project's a priority. She personally chose me to lead the security system integration team. Word is a Pentagon rep will be there. I nearly choked, not from surprise, but from the irony of fate. I knew exactly who that rep was. Oh, really, I said. Sounds important. It is, my father chimed in. If Vanguard secures that defense contract, it's not just Eric, the whole company will rise. Big military partners. My mother huffed. Hope they send someone competent, not some rank-wearing show-off. I met a major at last year's gala, sat through the whole thing clueless about tech. Typical, my father added. The military's a good place for those who can't compete in the real world. Rank systems. But step outside. I set my spoon down gently. What do you think of my path, I asked, not arguing, not challenging. Just a simple question between salad and the main course. My mother blinked. Sweetie, I just want you stable. A city job, a house, a retirement account. The military. I don't see you sticking with it long term. I wanted you to study law. Remember? I remembered. Vividly. So to you, I'm someone who's paused real life. Not like that, she stammered. I just worry. You deserve more. More, I echoed, like Eric. My father cut in, sensing the conversation veering off. Now, Rebecca, don't misunderstand. Eric's an example of the right track. If the military's not working out, you can still pivot. There's time. If I told them I held the approval power for the project they pinned their hopes on, what would they think? If they knew I was the one CEO Miranda Cole would introduce to the board tomorrow, would they still see me as a flawed choice? But I didn't say it. I didn't need to win an argument I was never invited to join. I smiled. I still have time, yes. Have you ever stayed silent, not from weakness, but because you were too strong to need to prove yourself? Ever sat among family and chosen not to share your success, knowing they only wanted to hear what fit their expectations? If so, share with me. I'm reading every word. Dinner continued with talk of stocks, houses' interest rates, successful acquaintances. I listened like a guest, not a daughter. As my father poured more wine, he glanced at me. Rebecca, are you still a lieutenant or captain now? Still in uniform, my mother interjected. I thought you'd moved to office support. I smiled. Still serving, in the right role. No one asked further. Dinner ended with the clink of dishes, the scrape of chairs, polite goodbyes. I washed my hands in the old sink where I'd done dishes through high school. In the mirror was my face calm, but my eyes had changed. No longer expectant, no longer needing understanding. Just ready for tomorrow. Tomorrow I wouldn't wait for questions. They'd know. Everything. I've always believed some clothes aren't just worn. They remind you who you are. My uniform is that. The next morning I woke before dawn. The house was still quiet, as if no one realized today was momentous. I opened my suitcase, pulled out the leather bag, and laid it on the bed like it held gold. To me, it was worth more. I removed the outer layer, revealing my midnight blue dress uniform, reserved for the most formal occasions. Each brass button polished to a mirror shine. The ribbon rack gleamed in the soft morning light. But most importantly, the silver colonel's insignia sparkling on my shoulders. It took 11 years to get here. Not one step was easy. In ROTC, I was the only woman in the tactical unit. During snowbound drills, I forced myself not to shiver, not to tire, not to seem weaker than anyone else, though my fingers turned purple from cold. Back then, I didn't think of a career. I just wanted to prove I could stand firm in a formation not built for me. I remember meeting General Evelyn Ross, then Colonel Ross, head of the strategic cybersecurity program. I was a fresh second lieutenant just through intensive training. In an impromptu meeting, I pointed out a logic flaw in a security analysis. While others debated, she looked at me silently and said, "Note her name." From then on, she guided me quietly, not with praise, but with expectations. Ross wasn't an easy leader, but she saw how I viewed problems differently and let me grow my way. When I uncovered a cyber attack pattern hidden in user behavior within air traffic control systems, she was the only one who didn't doubt me. She didn't need convincing, just evidence. And I had it. At 27, I was recommended for colonel 3 years early. Ross wrote the letter. At the ceremony, she whispered, "I chose you not because you're better, but because you see what others ignore." I fastened the last button, adjusted my insignia, and stepped back to the mirror. This wasn't just a senior officer. This was a daughter once dismissed, a woman underestimated, an expert behind national deals. I was Rebecca Adams, and today I wouldn't hide it. Have you ever had someone believe in you when you doubted yourself? Someone who pushed you beyond your dreams? Name them in the comments. Part of our success always carries their mark. I left the house early, avoiding my family. I wanted to enter Vanguard's headquarters as myself. No introductions, no clarifications. My title would speak. The company's headquarters rose like a steel and glass monolith in Colorado Springs' industrial heart. The Vanguard Technologies sign gleamed in the morning sun. I drove to the parking area marked Military Liaison. DoD clearance level V. My ID badge opened the gate automatically. A security guard snapped to attention as I stepped out. One saluted, "Good morning, Colonel Adams. You're expected on the 8th floor." I nodded. "No escort needed. I know the way." I'd studied the building's layout before this assignment. Project Aegis, the code name for Vanguard's defense security system, was a $1.2 billion contract signed directly with the Pentagon. As the military's representative, I had final say on technical approvals, budget, and timeline. The meeting room was on the 8th floor near the main research hub. I strode through the hallway where employees quietly turned to watch. They didn't know who I was, but the uniform and insignia drew eyes. I stood before the meeting room door, adjusted my nameplate, took a deep breath, not from fear, but because I knew when I stepped inside, roles would reverse. The dismissed would be welcomed. The forgotten would be expected. I pushed the door open. Eric was by the screen flipping through presentation slides. My father, James Adams, chatted with 2 technical directors. They all turned as I entered. Eric's eyes widened, his mouth slightly agape. My father froze like a statue. "Good morning," I said, voice steady and polite. "Rebecca Adams, Colonel, U.S. Army. I'm here for the Aegis project meeting." A director stood quickly. "Oh, we were told a military rep was coming, but didn't expect you in person. This project's important enough for me to oversee directly." My father said nothing. He looked at me as if trying to reconcile the daughter he taught to drive with the one he'd called directionless. Eric started to speak, but I turned to the screen. "I'll take the center seat next to CEO Cole, the position for the project oversight commander. We have 20 minutes. I wasn't here to shock. I was here to work. Some moments don't need rehearsal. They arrive like a slow verdict, unhurried, but irreversible. I entered Vanguard Technologies' main boardroom at 8:42 a.m. per my military issue watch. Each step echoed evenly on the polished stone floor. In another setting, that sound might be mundane. Here, in a corporate environment where uniforms were rare, it was like a drum in a quiet cathedral. The long, oval boardroom table was filling with directors and team leads. Some stood reflexively as I entered. A young assistant nearly dropped her files when her eyes caught the colonel's insignia on my shoulder. Then I saw them. Eric stood at the room's far end by the projector screen holding a tablet. His gaze locked on me as if trying to determine who or what I could be. My father stood near the table, mouth slightly open, coffee cup in hand. It didn't fall, but a nudge would have toppled it. I walked to the center chair where a nameplate read KOL, Rebecca Adams, DoD liaison. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The silence said it all. If you've ever returned to a place where you were underestimated, only to reappear in a role no one expected, you know this feeling. It's not victory. It's resolution. A quiet but clear statement. I'm still me, but you saw me wrong. I adjusted my chair, sat, and opened my documents. Not a glance at Eric or my father. I gave them time to rearrange their worldviews. At 9:00 sharp, the door opened. Miranda Cole swept in like a deliberate cold breeze. She wasn't tall, wasn't loud, but each step reshaped the room's gravity. Directors stood. She nodded, then smiled when her eyes met mine. Colonel Adams, Miranda said loudly, striding toward me, an unexpected honor to have you here in person. I thought we'd be meeting via video. I stood, shaking her hand. I felt this project warranted my direct presence. And I'm in town. Miranda's gaze flicked to my nameplate, then to my father and Eric. I wasn't sure if she'd connected us yet, but she sensed something in the air. Perfect, she said, addressing the room. This is Colonel Rebecca Adams, the Pentagon's official representative overseeing all technical and security aspects of Project Aegis. She has final approval authority for all phases. I heard a faint intake of breath from Eric. My father sat still, clutching his coffee, but not drinking. Miranda sat beside me. Shall we begin? I nodded, flipping to the first page of my documents. The meeting started with the integration team's presentation. They spoke quickly, precisely, their eyes darting to gauge my reactions. I kept my face neutral. At key points, I nodded, marking my notes. When Eric's turn came, the air shifted noticeably. He stood, his tablet hand trembling slightly. The UI/UX team has finalized the user interaction simulation for Aegis, he began. We've improved access hierarchy, optimized navigation interfaces, and used user data to propose intuitive solutions. I raised my hand. Sorry, is the access hierarchy still using a sequential structure instead of multi-branch authorization? Eric blinked. Yes, but our team thought sequential was simpler for training purposes. I nodded, jotting a note. I'll need a detailed analysis of why this model was chosen with a comparison to multi-branch architecture. Present it by week's end. Yes. Eric sat visibly off balance. I didn't glance at my father, but I felt his eyes on me for the rest of the meeting. Have you ever sat in a chair you were never invited to before, become the one listened to in a room where you once stayed silent? Share. I'm here to read and relate. The meeting stretched over 2 hours. At the end, Miranda stood patting my shoulder. Colonel, your presence today is reassuring. This project will stay on track. I stood nodding politely. I'll remain for 48 hours to coordinate directly with technical teams. All leads should prepare materials per my guidance. People filed out one by one. My father stayed seated. Eric lingered near the door, hesitant. Finally, my father spoke. Rebecca, how long have you been at this rank? 6 months. He nodded slowly, saying nothing more. But something in his eyes shifted. Not satisfaction, not disappointment. Confusion. As if he had to relearn how to see me. Sitting at the center of Vanguard's executive boardroom, I didn't feel triumph. No fanfare in my head, no smug smile on my lips. What I brought to this room wasn't revenge. It was discipline, responsibility, and perhaps truth. That meeting wasn't like my others where I often had to prove my right to speak. Here my title spoke first. Colonel Rebecca Adams, Department of Defense. A single line on the nameplate neatly set before me. Miranda Cole, CEO of Vanguard Technologies, sat to my left. Department heads presented in turn. Each name came with a discreet glance my way. A female military officer overseeing a $1.2 billion defense contract wasn't a common sight in a civilian tech firm. I listened, took notes, asked at the right moments. Auditing isn't about questioning from doubt, but ensuring no process goes off by half a beat. When you've served where a single wrong line of code could cost lives, you learn to hear what others overlook. Eric's turn came. I could feel his pulse quicken as he stepped forward. Tablet in hand, a strained smile on his lips. We've completed the data integration model from user interface to real-time alert systems. Event response logic is streamlined to ensure latency under 180 milliseconds. I nodded. Has the synchronization with the military's cloud analysis module been tested? Eric glanced around. We're still planning coordination. Do you have a preliminary plan? I believe the technical team is still finalizing, so the 180 millisecond response doesn't include cloud platform data transfer time. Eric fell silent. I didn't press further. That was enough for the room to grasp the system was under serious scrutiny. I turned to Miranda. This impacts end-phase security approval criteria. I recommend delaying formal testing 1 week to review tiered connectivity. Miranda nodded instantly. Agreed. Eric, your team needs to update the plan. Eric sat without a word, his gaze avoiding mine. Not angry, disoriented. For the first time I saw acknowledgement in his eyes, not of power, but of competence. My father sat farther down no longer with yesterday's skeptical look. He didn't interrupt, didn't object, didn't challenge. But I knew he was straining to process a new truth. His daughter, whom he'd dismissed as doing clerical military work, sat in a position that could redirect the project his career hinged on. Have you ever been in a moment where someone who thought you weren't enough had to listen to you speak in front of their peers? Don't hesitate to share your story, might inspire someone reading this. The meeting continued with the security module presentation, the heart of Project Aegis, the system safeguarding millions of strategic military data points from the most sophisticated cyber attacks. I asked 5 technical questions, 3 requiring the team to verify before answering. Not because they were incompetent, but because military systems demand a different language. I was the translator between worlds. Finally, Miranda concluded, "Thank you all, especially Colonel Adams, for her precise and invaluable input. Her presence not only strengthens our progress, but ensures our credibility with the Pentagon." I nodded. "I'll stay 48 hours to work directly with technical teams. All leads should prepare materials per my instructions." The meeting ended in silence. No applause, no sighs of relief. Just the quiet of a shift being accepted. I stood gathering my documents. As I turned to leave, Miranda walked me to the hallway. "I'm guessing they didn't know you were coming today," she asked, half joking, half serious. I smiled. "No one ever really knows what I do." Miranda nodded. "It's time they did." In the elevator, I caught my father's gaze again from the hallway's far end. He stood there unmoving, no longer cold. Just a man trying to re-understand the daughter he thought he knew. The atmosphere at that evening's dinner was unlike any family gathering I'd ever seen. The chandelier cast a warm golden glow over the white-clothed table. The soft clink of cutlery on plates filled the air formal, but not tense. I sat between 2 worlds that once clashed in my life. On one side, my family. On the other, those who believed in me when my family didn't. To my right was General Evelyn Ross in a Navy civilian suit, exuding effortless authority. To my left, Miranda Cole, Vanguard's CEO, openly proud of the project's progress under military oversight. Across from me, my parents sat quietly, their eyes alternating between forced calm and absorbing long-dusted memories. Eric sat at an angle trying to keep up conversation with Miranda, but his gaze occasionally flicked to me, then away as if unaccustomed to his wayward sister being the room's focal point. Wine was poured, the main course served. General Ross recounted our first meeting during a strategic cybersecurity simulation. She didn't just read systems like the back of her hand, she saw failures before they happened. She said, "Not many in the military have that instinct." My mother smiled politely. My father lowered his head. I knew he was truly listening. Then, as dessert arrived, an apple tart redolent of childhood, my father stood. No one prompted him. No one expected it. But he did. "I'd like to say a few words," he said, his voice firm but not loud. All forks paused. The air froze for a breath. I looked at him, head slightly tilted, wary. Old pain had taught me to brace for harsh words, but this time was different. I thought I understood what makes a person valuable. That success was measurable by corporate rank titles, the stability you could display. He paused. "I was wrong. Not because she's a colonel or oversees my company's critical contract. I was wrong because I wasn't humble enough to listen to my daughter. I underestimated the value of service sacrifice and loyalty to something others can't see. I heard every word, and I stopped holding my breath. Rebecca," he looked directly at me, "I'm sorry. Not just for not understanding, but for not wanting to. That was my greatest mistake." Beside me, General Ross touched my wrist reassuringly. Miranda nodded slightly, her respect not just for me but for my father, who'd just spoken the hardest words of a stubborn man's life. I stood not from protocol but because my heart demanded it. "Thank you, Dad," I said, voice steady, but soft. I didn't need recognition to live true to my choices. But I value this apology not just for me, but for you. My mother's eyes glistened. For the first time she didn't hold back. Eric clinked his glass lightly with mine, half hesitant, half sincere. Something was shifting, not loudly, not dramatically, but slowly, like snow melting after a long winter. If you've ever had an apology never spoken, or been the one who needed to say it, share your story, that moment might reach someone needing courage like you once did. The dinner continued with light laughter, genuine sharing. No more roles, no more defenses. Just people. After the meal, as we parted in the hotel lobby, my father approached again. "General Ross is remarkable, but you're the one who made me rethink myself." I said nothing, just squeezed his hand. For the first time, there was no distance. It wasn't the boardroom applause or the director's odd looks that day, but that evening after the dinner that made me feel I'd touched something I thought was out of reach, my family's understanding. We returned home saying little, not from awkwardness, but because we were each lost in our thoughts. So was I. Stepping through the familiar threshold, the old wall clock still ticked, the pine scent still clung to the walls after countless winters. But something was different. My mother touched my shoulder gently. "Rebecca, you can change upstairs. I'll make tea. We could talk a bit." I nodded, asking nothing more. When I returned to the living room in casual clothes, the family sat around the tea table. The soft golden light spilled from the old floor lamp by the armchair. My father sat quietly cradling a hot cup. Eric looked down as I entered, something new in his gaze. Not subtle disdain, but acknowledgement. My mother invited me to sit beside her. After a pause, she pulled an old envelope from a drawer under the table, its edges curled with time. "This I wrote 6 years ago after reading the first article about your mission in Europe. I never sent it." She placed it in my palm. I looked at the envelope. Her soft, familiar handwriting stung my heart. The first line, "To my daughter Rebecca." I opened it, hands trembling. All eyes were on me, but no one spoke. "My daughter." I read the article 3 times this morning. Each time I felt pride and shame. Pride because you've grown strong, brave beyond anything I imagined. Shame because I didn't see it sooner. I'm sorry for not understanding your passion. For staying silent when your father imposed. For not protecting you when you needed it. I still remember the day you got the military scholarship. You stood at the dinner table, eyes bright like a child who'd found her own star. But I said nothing in support. I was scared. Scared you'd go far, suffer, not stay the obedient daughter I'd pictured. But now I see you didn't need me to hold you back. You needed me to let you fly. If you read this, know I love you. I always have. I just wasn't always brave enough to show it. The words blurred, not from aged paper, but my tears. In the room where I'd felt isolated and invisible, these words were proof of a silent love, now voiced. I looked up. My mother was crying too. Not sobbing, not dramatic. Just real tears from a mother carrying a sky of regret. I said nothing. I stood and hugged her, tightly, as if 6 years' distance could be bridged by one embrace. The room stilled, then Eric broke the silence. "Becca," he hesitated. I turned still in my mother's arms. "I didn't know. I really didn't. I thought you just took an easy way out, an impulsive choice. But today, seeing you there in that uniform among the directors, I saw how wrong I was." I looked at him. Eric was never one for apologies. He grew up as the heir success expected, failure sidestepped. "Thank you for saying that," I said softly. "Not just because you're good," he continued, "but because you're brave. You took a path no one here dared consider. You lived true to what you believe. I admire that." I didn't expect those words to lighten my heart so much. No fireworks, no grand atonement. Just a simple acknowledgement enough to untangle years of discord. "You'll be surprised plenty more," I teased lightly. "I can bake better than you, too." Everyone laughed. Not loudly, but genuinely. It was the first time I felt my family wasn't a place I had to avoid to protect myself. It was a place I could return to, not to be forgiven, but to forgive. That night before bed, my mother hugged me again. She didn't need to say anything. Neither did I. True love sometimes needs no further words. If you've had a tough conversation with family, or wished for a letter never written, share with me in the comments. Someone out there needs to know they're not alone in seeking understanding. If someone had told me one day my family would gather in my DC apartment, eating, laughing, no one mocking the military, I'd have smiled and said nothing. But tonight, 6 months after that fateful Vanguard meeting, it's happening quietly, sincerely, truly. My apartment's on the 18th floor of a modern complex overlooking the Potomac's shimmering waters. 2 bedrooms flooded with natural light, simple and tidy, reflecting me after years of discipline. Everything here is my choice. Tonight, I chose to open my door to my family not from duty, but desire. The doorbell rang at 6:00 p.m. Sharp, I opened it. My mother stood first, holding a familiar tin, her eyes shy but warm. "Apple pie," she said, smiling. "Still your favorite recipe." I nodded, taking the tin. One sentence, but I knew she'd spent a week preparing not just the pie, but the courage to be here. I set it on the table, then greeted my father, who carried a large wooden frame wrapped in silver paper. "This you should keep," he said, setting it down and unwrapping it. It was a Defense Weekly article on Project Aegis featuring a photo of me shaking hands with General Evelyn Ross and Miranda Cole at the Phase 2 signing. Hang it in your office, or bedroom. But it deserves to be seen. I said nothing, just touched the frame and nodded. Eric arrived last, holding a bottle of Italian red wine. No tie, just a sweater and a real smile. "You're bad at picking wine, so I had a colleague choose. They say this pairs with an intimate dinner." He handed me the bottle, then looked around my apartment. "This space is so you. Neat, quiet, very Rebecca." We sat at the table. I served the dishes I'd prepared: vegetable salad, honey-glazed chicken, and Mom's apple pie for dessert. No aperitifs, no speeches. We just sat together as we once did, but this time no pretending, no assumptions of who's better or right. "I still remember that dinner 6 months ago in Colorado," Eric said, pouring wine and glancing at me. "I was awful, truly. And I want to say it again, I didn't understand you. But that evening in the boardroom, I started to." I looked at him, no blame. "Thanks for saying it. Not everyone has the courage to admit they were wrong." My father cleared his throat, setting down his glass. "I read the documents you sent. Didn't understand everything, but I tried. And each time I wondered how I judged you all these years. It wasn't fair." I turned to him. "I don't need everyone to understand everything, just respect. And stop seeing me as a stubborn kid." "No one sees you like that anymore," my mother said, gently taking my hand. Then she sighed. "Rebecca, that day you came home, I knew something changed. Not in you, but in how I saw you. That letter, I wrote it the night you first appeared in the news. But I didn't send it. I was scared. I found it. After you left the kitchen," I said. She smiled faintly. "Do you forgive me?" "I forgave you long ago, Mom, but today I'm ready to say it." The room softened. No one spoke for a moment. Just the clink of cutlery, the pour of wine, the quiet sighs of relief, like we'd all crossed a long winter in our relationships, and now sat in the warmth of a new season. "Rebecca," my father said after a pause, "what's your plan after your Pentagon term?" I smiled. "A few offers, but I haven't decided. Maybe teaching, maybe consulting on public safety projects, or maybe a year off to write a book." Eric raised an eyebrow. "A book? About what's unseen behind the uniform, about the true value of choice, and how someone can stand firm even without support until the end. If you're reading this and have lived in the shadow of family or societal expectations, I want your story. Did you choose a different path? Did they ever look at you anew? Comment and share." I believe understanding comes when we're brave enough to stay ourselves. As they prepared to leave, my mother turned back, looking at me long. "Rebecca, next time you're in Colorado, bring your uniform. I want to hang it beside Eric's diploma." I squeezed her hand. "If you do use a good frame, it's the only one I'm not replacing." We all laughed. I closed the door behind them. The apartment returned to quiet. But this time the silence wasn't lonely. It was the calm of someone who'd gone far enough to know where home truly is. I don't often invite people over, but with General Evelyn Ross, it's a given. 6 months ago, she sat beside me at the dinner where my father apologized publicly. Today she came as a friend, a mentor, and to me, a living witness to a journey my family never saw firsthand. My mother prepared dinner, simple but meticulous. My father wore a crisp shirt, likely the first time not for work. Eric arrived early, bringing flowers for the woman who shaped my sister into a colonel. I laughed. I stood at the door, adjusting my uniform one last time, before opening it for her. General Ross, as always, was impeccable, her calm sharpness undimmed. She smiled. "Rebecca, I hear you've learned to pick wine." I grinned. "Learning from Eric." But Mom's apple pie is on the menu, tempted to switch to culinary arts. I hear it's better than field rations, she quipped, making my mother chuckle. Dinner was warmer than I'd imagined. No one mentioned old wounds, and the air held no strain. After the main course, my father, once only asking if I was still a lieutenant or something, offered Ross a glass of wine and asked with genuine curiosity, "Can you tell me about Rebecca's first day?" I froze slightly. Ross didn't. Her first day was a conversation like no other. The only cadet who came to me and said, "If I have clear reasoning, am I allowed to disobey a wrong order?" Everyone laughed. I blushed. "I thought I'd be expelled after that," I muttered. Ross shook her head. "No, I knew this is a kid who thinks and isn't afraid to stand up. That's rare. Sometimes I thought if the military couldn't keep her, we'd lose a mind that could reshape defense systems." My father fell silent, looking at her with a mix of respect and awe. My mother gazed at me as if seeing the woman across from her, not the girl who sneaked military books in her room. Eric laughed. "If you were like that as a kid, I had no chance at being the family hero." "You're still a hero if you fix yourself," I said gently. I turned to my mother. "I always thought you weren't proud because you didn't understand me. But today I see sometimes people don't need to understand fully to start listening." Her hand trembled in mine. "I'm sorry it took me so many years to start." General Ross set down her glass. "I've met many generals, many warriors. But what I'm proudest of is when people like Rebecca misjudged prove themselves through steadfast silence and loyalty. Not to the military, but to their own values." The room stilled. Then my father stood formal as if facing a military council, not a living room. "General Ross. I once thought the military was for those who couldn't compete in the real world. But today, hearing you, I see, I was short-sighted." She nodded. "Ignorance is normal. Not correcting it is the issue." I looked around, every eye on me. No longer skeptical or pitying. Just recognition, wordless degree, less just my true presence. "What do you think, has an outsider like a boss, teacher, or colleague ever told your family what you've wanted to say? Your whole life, comment and share. Sometimes one outsider's words change everything." Dinner ended with apple pie coffee and small stories, my first training. My first commendation, the minor injury I hid from Mom. Each tale, however small, made my family listen, like those moments truly mattered. Escorting Ross to her car, I asked, "Why'd you share so much today?" She turned, her sharp eyes softening. "Because it's time you stopped proving yourself. They've seen what you do. The rest is for them to keep learning." I stood in DC's night breeze. The next chapter is mine, not against anyone, but to write my life my way. I've never been good at savoring moments. Even when celebrated, I think of unfinished tasks, battles yet to fight. But tonight, under my apartment's warm golden light, amid my family's soft laughter around the table, I let myself just be. And when my father raised his glass, I knew it wasn't for courtesy. "To Rebecca," he said, voice trembling, but eyes steady. "To our daughter. We lost time, made mistakes, but now we understand. And we're proud." I didn't cry, but I felt my final shield, the one I kept for defense, crack at last. Not because I needed forgiveness, but because I no longer needed it. Have you ever had someone who doubted you offer acknowledgement? Share your story, I truly want to hear. After dinner, we cleared the table like any family. No talk of ranks or billion-dollar contracts. My mother packed leftover pie, whispering to keep it for tomorrow's breakfast. Eric poured tea, setting his phone aside for once. No rivalry in his eyes, just the weariness of someone who'd learned something. I sat back, looking around. The people who'd hurt me were now those I was most grateful for. Not because they were right, but because they dared to change. Even late. My father approached no longer with his usual authority. He rested a hand on my shoulder. "You don't know how fast my heart raced at that dinner when I stood to apologize. Not because you're a colonel, but because I was finally a father properly." I smiled faintly. "I didn't need apologies to live true, Dad. But thank you for choosing to understand." The moment didn't linger, but it was enough. Enough to untie years of silence, heavy dinner's words that should have stayed unsaid. As my family left, the apartment fell quiet. I stood on the balcony, autumn breeze in my hair, National Mall lights twinkling like fallen stars. I once thought I needed recognition to feel successful, but I realized I had to redefine my own victory. Not becoming a colonel at 28. Not overseeing a $1.2 billion contract. Not silencing a boardroom. But standing here not angry, no longer needing to prove myself. I thought I'd return to make them regret. But I came back to open a door, and thankfully they stepped through. Victory isn't applause, it's peace. I went inside, removed my insignia, hung my uniform carefully. I didn't need it as armor anymore. Tonight it was a badge, but I was just me. I pulled my mother's old letter from the drawer. I didn't need it to prove her love. I kept it to remind myself sometimes love needs time, words, and courage. I slipped it back into its envelope, tucked it away. Not to forget, but to preserve. A text from Eric lit up my phone. Free tomorrow afternoon. Want you to share with our young engineers about crisis management. They need to hear from someone who's been on the front lines. I smiled, typing back. Free. But you're making the coffee. My phone paused, then showed a smiley face. I looked around my apartment. Clean, simple, full of light. Not lavish, but somehow like home. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel I had to leave to find peace. I'd carried it with me all along, I just hadn't opened it. The end, but not the finish. Because I know the road ahead is long. But this time, I'm not walking alone. If you've ever been underestimated for taking a different path, leave a comment. I believe every journey matters, especially when you're the one who dared take the first step. When I began this journey back to my old home, I didn't expect the greatest thing I'd find wasn't recognition, but understanding. This story isn't just mine, a female officer returning in silence, but about everyone misunderstood who chose their path and carried quiet wounds from being unheard. I've learned strength isn't being unhurt, but choosing to love despite rejection. You don't need revenge to win. The greatest victory sometimes is keeping yourself and your family. If this story touched you, comment below. I want your story, your journey, and what you chose to forgive. Don't forget to follow the channel for more real stories of resilience, pain, and healing, because sometimes a story is the first step to mending. Thank you for walking with me to the end of this road.